Good morning, kids. Today we're checking out a brand new video from the film that is The Tragedy of the Man in the Suit, Godzilla Analog Horror. Let's hop in and check out this new monster.
Interview September 15th, 1958. Subject
okay.
1, Matthew Patrick. Subject, Godzilla, whatever the hell that is. So, tell me, Mr. Patrick, what exactly did you see?
You don't understand. It wasn't a person. It wasn't human. At least not anymore.
Ooh.
How? It was just a man in a suit.
No, it's something else now. It mutated, and it's coming for us.
That would have been the right time to see the eye, like, move.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that has the world's best imitation of the Godzilla roar.
That was my
that is a bug,
very lame
Matthew.
Godzilla scream.
Listen, Toho is notoriously protective of that roar. It's the best that we're gonna do, alright? So, we're all familiar with Godzilla, right? King of the Monsters, been a mainstay in movie theaters for the past 7 decades. He's appeared in nearly 40 films and single-handedly pioneered the whole kaiju genre. And of course, with that amount of history, you're gonna have a ton of different interpretations of the character, from the big-budget American movies where he fights King Kong in the Monsterverse, to true low-budget horror masterpieces like this year's Godzilla -1. But today, I want to look at a completely different take on the character. One that's available right here, right now on good old YouTube.com. A new analog horror series known simply as The Man in the Suit. You're not hearing that incorrectly. It's an analog horror series about Godzilla, or at least the human inside of Godzilla. And let me tell you, loyal theorists, the story that tells is simultaneously scary, tragic, and heartbreaking. In an overcrowded genre full of cheap thrills, The Man in the Suit's covering some massive topics with devastating themes, which is only made more impressive once you realize that the channel's creator unknowingly is just doing this all on their phone. Also, and this is just a side note here, it recently came to my attention that Unknowingly was getting harassed by a small subset of the Godzilla fan community for the series and thinking about ending the entire thing. To which I say, first off, Unknowingly, your work is great. The story that you're telling is mature, it's thoughtful. Don't let a small group of whiny, butthurt man-children diminish the great work that you're doing. Speaking of those butthurt man-children, if you are one of those people who harass someone's fan creation because the visuals are bad or the story isn't what you like, guess what? You are a baby and you need to go change your diaper. Wah man, baby, go back to your crib. Valid constructive criticism, that's one thing. That is great. It is valuable to creators across the board. But sending death threats to a kid making a fan series on his phone because in your eyes it disrespects your rubber suit lizard monster, guess what? You're the real monster.
Damn,
oh boy, I went a little bit harder than I expected on that one, but I had to get it off my chest. You see, in case you missed it, I made an announcement over on Game Theory that these next 10 weeks of episodes will actually be my final 10 weeks of hosting these channels. Don't get me wrong, I'm still gonna be around working on really cool projects in the background, including a lo-fi related ARG that I'm just really hyped about, but it's not gonna be me recording these scripts every single week. I talk about it in a lot more detail over there, in case you're curious as to what's coming next, but the long and short of it is that my time as the film theorist is coming to a close, and so, you know what? I'm just gonna tell it like it is. And Toxic fans, you suck. You have ruined so many series for so many people. You are the worst. Go home. Let people enjoy what they want without you trying to gatekeep it. And everyone else out there, don't feed the trolls. Ignore them. They'll go away to their lonely little holes. Whew, kept that one pent up for a while. Anyway, The Man in the Suit. It harkens back to the earliest days of the Godzilla franchise, when all special effects had to be done practically. So to simulate a giant lizard terrorizing Tokyo, the filmmakers had a real stuntman put on a big rubber suit and stomp through miniature models of the cities that it was fighting in. However,
that's why he moves so slow.
It was a far bigger challenge than you might initially realize. They had no eye holes for the actors to see out of. They weighed over 220 pounds. Internally, they heated up to extreme temperatures, and they were so difficult to breathe in that the crew often had to attach a tube to get the actor air. A tube that had to be removed when they were actually filming the darn thing. There was even one incident where an actor almost drowned when his breathing tube fell out as he was being lowered into a pool of freezing water. That right there, it already sounds like a terrifying experience. But The Man in the Suit takes things a step further, reimagining that claustrophobic experience as one that never ends, as the suit completely consumes the person inside, turning them into a mutant monster themselves. But underneath all of this monster business is actually a surprisingly heartfelt story about pain, grief, and overcoming cycles of violence brought about by one of the worst tragedies in human history. Yeah, this is one of those series, friends. So charge up that atomic breath, loyal theorists, as we begin to unzip the secrets of the man in the suit. Now, before we actually hop into the discussion, I did want to acknowledge up front that the series includes fictionalized versions of real people who actually existed. This includes the real actors who played characters like Godzilla and the other kaiju. These aren't just anonymous stunt people. However, the man in the suit is also clearly set in an alternate universe, dealing with events that never actually happened, even if they are happening to real people. I just wanted to clarify that because when you're dealing with these sorts of online analog horror series or ARGs based on dramatized versions of real events, it's best to clearly separate the real fact from the fiction. So in classic analog horror fashion, the actual plot of the man...
And also, a lot of people normally have trouble with that. They end up confusing one and the other for both.
Isn't exactly the easiest thing to follow. Everything's told to us through VHS tapes uploaded by an anonymous American cameraman who worked on some of the original Godzilla movies back in the day, and it was far more disturbing than you might think. The original actor hired to get into the Godzilla suit became obsessed with it, staying in costume the entire time that he was on set during breaks, even taking it home after work despite being told not to. The producer on the film says that it's almost like the suit was talking to the actor. Eventually, the actor started calling himself Goji, a nickname borrowed from Gojira, the Japanese name for Godzilla. Now, you might chalk all this up as an actor taking his role very seriously. I mean, this guy could very well be the Jared Leto of kaiju films. But quickly, things start to escalate, taking a turn for the worst. Goji's breathing becomes strange, and he stops moving entirely for minutes on end, despite the crew's best efforts to keep him on track. Eventually, they decide to take a look inside the suit to check on Goji, but what they found inside was no longer human. Goji's flesh and bones had grown into the suit, flesh filling all the empty space inside. His organs rearranged, and he's lost his vocal cords, though he could still see out of the suit's eye sockets with bloodshot eyes. The suit has become his new skin, his new body. The man and the suit have become one. Of course, instead of doing everything they can to help this obviously suffering man that they had literally transformed into a monster, the production company Toho just decides to keep this turn of events secret from the public, partly out of fear of being sued, but mostly because Godzilla was just making him a whole lot of money. They had merch to sell and movies to make, baby, so the show had to go on. And now, hey, they had themselves an actor fully dedicated to the part. However, as the years roll on, it becomes clear that Toho has no real control over the creature. During the filming of the sequel, while shooting a scene between Godzilla and a new monster called Anguirus, Goji ends up attacking his co-star, biting into his suit, causing the other actor to bleed. The stunt performer inside screams out in pain, and when the crew opens up the Anguirus suit, they find that it too has been transformed into a monster, just like Goji. Toho decides to cover up this incident too, and attempt to tame Goji so they can continue making Godzilla films. It doesn't work. They even try removing the man from the suit with power tools, but still nothing. One time the monster even manages to escape the studio. Still, nothing is enough. While filming the 1962 film King Kong vs. Godzilla, Goji gets enraged by the use of an American character like King Kong, drowning the actor in the Kong costume during one of their fight scenes. In an attempt to keep Goji from biting other stuntmen, the studio creates a puppet for their next monster, Mothra. But they don't consider that Goji may just bite anyone in any sort of prosthetic. A woman inside a prosthesis for one of Mothra's larvae is bitten, just like Goji and Anguirus before her, also becomes one with the suit. Eventually, the situation gets so dire that the government of Japan gets involved, intent on covering it all up and studying these mutations more closely. Radioactive material starts growing out of Goji's blood, with some claiming to see eyes within that material. Despite all of this, Toho continues on, intent on making more movies. And when the anonymous cameraman sees the concept art for King Ghidorah, the next monster Godzilla's gonna fight, he decides to step in and try to stop it himself. And yeah, when it comes to the main story beats for the man in the suit, that's more or less it so far. Unknowingly, I said that the series isn't completed yet, so there is more to come, but I think that there's more than enough here for us to dig into and explain what exactly the series is trying to say. First things first, what exactly is making Goji do all of this? What's transformed him from an actor in a costume into a beast? Well, according to one expert character in the series, she believes that this mutation is the byproduct of radioactivity.
This is the work of radiation. The man in the suit doesn't fuse with the suit instantly. His body explodes in the suit, then it reshapes itself in the suit.
Now, if you know anything about Godzilla as a franchise, all this talk about radiation should be making your Geiger counters go off.
I mean, he was first created to be like a physical representation of nuclear war.
When Godzilla was first created, he wasn't just some city-sized monster of the week for a horror movie. He represented something much darker than that. You have to remember that the first Godzilla movie was released all the way back in 1954, nearly 70 years ago. And while that might seem like ancient history to us millennials and zoomers, this was a particularly important moment for Japanese culture and history. Think about this time period. It was less than a decade after the end of World War II, and the US deployment of the two atomic bombs that devastated the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This is where Godzilla comes from. A monster literally created from nuclear radiation from an atomic bomb test mutating a prehistoric lizard living under the Pacific Ocean. For the original audience of this film, the idea of a kaiju like Godzilla being an unintended consequence of nuclear waste would have been a very real, legitimate fear, considering that we had no idea what the long-term effects of this level of nuclear radiation were. But that's just the surface level reading of Godzilla. There's a deeper one here that not only has the King of Monsters standing in as a product of mutation, but as an allegory for the nuclear bombs themselves. As the director of the original film put it, if Godzilla had just been some animal, it could have been killed with traditional weaponry. Sure, it would still be a threat, but not the true terror that we see present on screen. Godzilla is the atomic bomb. The destruction that he leaves behind, it's indiscriminate. He's an unstoppable force devoid of morality, destroying anything and everything in his path, and leaving nothing behind but rubble. This is also why the powerful beam attack that Godzilla shoots out
Now he has become death, destroyer of worlds.
Out of his mouth is called his atomic breath, even sometimes being depicted as creating a mushroom cloud similar to a nuclear explosion. Godzilla is both metaphorically and literally a nuclear weapon. And this is what unknowingly and the man in the suit is using as a jumping off point for their story. Don't believe me? The connection is further driven home during the video Suit Trial, where we see Toho experimenting with Goji and playing audio tracks to see how it reacts. During one such test, we hear Goji spewing some garbled mess in what appears to be English. At first, it's very difficult to make out, but if you listen closely, speeding up the audio track, you
hold on. The guy in the suit was definitely Asian, Japanese. So how is he now speaking English? Was it an English actor? No, it wasn't.
Realize that Goji is actually reciting a quote from famous physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer, the main architect of the American atomic program and the leader of the Manhattan Project.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Literally
this is a very real thing that Oppenheimer said years after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, showing immense guilt for the unspeakable destruction that his scientific breakthroughs caused to not only the people of Japan, but potentially every human on the planet. Fun fact, by the way, Oppenheimer actually said this quote in 1965, at least 4 to 5 years after this point in The Man in the Suit takes place. But hey, we've already established that it's an alternate universe, so who knows? Maybe things just happened in a different order in that timeline. Regardless, this is still an incredibly heavy and important historical quote, and given what we know about the history and symbolism of Godzilla as a franchise, there is clearly some level of deeper connection here. Thankfully, Unknowingly has left us plenty of breadcrumbs to follow. In classic analog horror fashion, there's more hidden in each of these uploads than just the videos themselves. For instance, if you take a peek down below the videos, you'll find some text in the description written in Japanese, and we can learn a lot from what's said down there. Like here, in the very first episode's description, it reads as follows. Godzilla may be a monster, but he seems different to me.
Thank you.
He's rather a god. I will be the meat of the beast. I will be the host of Godzilla. I will live in this beast because he is the only one who can help us. There is no god, just me, Goji. From this, we can tell that the man in the suit clearly sees himself as a separate entity to Godzilla, but he's willing to sacrifice his identity to give Godzilla form, to merge his flesh with the suit to become something new, to become Goji. But why? What's the whole endgame here? Well, in the description of the Anguirus suit incident, if you
honestly, this is giving off some Silent Hill type energies.
Translate the Japanese, you're treated to a conversation between two entities. At first, I thought this might be a conversation between the suit and the man inside of the suit, but given that this is on a video about Anguirus and how he was transformed by Goji, the two people in this back and forth have to be the Goji entity and the man inside of Anguirus, his first victim, the first person that was transformed by Goji's radioactive bite. The man inside Anguirus cries out in pain, calling for God to ease his suffering, but only Goji answers, telling Anguirus that he knows that he lost his family, and that Goji can make him whole again, that he can take revenge and kill those who wronged him. And if you're guessing that those who wronged us could be connected to the atomic bomb, well, you'd be right on the money. See, Anguirus isn't the only person who lost family during those tragedies. In the video titled Mailed Message, our American protagonist is sent a VHS tape presumably created by Goji himself. Not entirely sure how Goji was able to make a tape with his tiny little stubby arms, but hey, that is a mystery for another day. The tape explains that the man in the suit once lived in Hiroshima and happened to be on a business trip the day that the bomb detonated above the city, which in turn killed his wife and children. Goji blames all Americans for his incredible pain, knowing that they cheered when Japan surrendered. And now he wants to take every everything from the Americans in return. And suddenly Goji's behavior in other parts of the series makes a lot more sense. This is why he became so hostile during the production of King Kong vs. Godzilla. It was a co-production with American producers and American characters, and at least in Unknowingly's universe, American crew. This enraged Goji, who saw the entire production as a betrayal of not only himself, but of Japan as a whole. As another quote hidden in the video description says, he sees everyone involved as filthy traitors, playing with him like a toy, forcing him to work with the people who killed his family. And this anger is why the situation eventually boils over during the filming. The script called for King Kong to win, and that's what happens in the real world version of the movie. But here, when the two tumble into the sea, only Goji emerges, having drowned the actor playing Kong, eliminating someone that he saw as a traitor. Now, all of this makes for a really compelling story, and I'm kind of amazed with how much detail and nuance is packed into what appears to be a simple series of slideshows. But what is the story trying to tell us on a thematic level? Why did Unknowingly make this in the first place? Well, when you start putting everything together, it's clear that this is a tale of two parts: grief and vengeance. On the one hand, the man in the suit is clearly a tragic character. In one moment, he lost both his family and his country. That kind of